Morning and welcome to today's almost daily devotional. We are going to read in Exodus chapter 16. We're starting with the second verse, and it goes like this. The whole Israelite community complained against Moses and Aaron in the desert. The Israelites said to them, "Oh, how we wish that the Lord had just put us to death while we were still in the land of Egypt. There we could sit by the pots cooking meat and eat our fill of bread. Instead, you brought us out into this desert to starve this whole assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to make bread rain down from the sky for you. The people will go out each day and gather just enough for that day. In this way, I'll test them to see whether or not they follow my instruction." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole Israelite community, 'Come near to the Lord because he's heard your complaints.'" As Aaron spoke to the whole Israelite community, they turned to look toward the desert, and just then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared in the cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses, "I've heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat. In the morning you will have your fill of bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." In the evening a flock of quail flew down and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew all around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the desert surface were thin flakes, as thin as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said, "What is this?" They didn't know what it was. If God's provision for the sojourners is obvious to them on a daily basis because they're literally given manna every day, bread, literally given their daily bread every day, and given their dew and their water every day, which is kind of a big deal when you're wandering in the desert. Water is not something you take for granted. If God is providing for them every day, whether in that daily bread or daily work, which is like the gathering of the quail and the harvesting of the manna and all those things, God's presence is not as obvious. Many of us wish we could see God, that we could see God manifested in things like the burning bush, or we could see God come from heaven. I'm reminded of that cartoon of God in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, who's looks like a little bit like an English king. It happens to look like an English king in the sky with clouds, and he talks to them with a little mouth that moves up and down. We all kind of wish that we could experience God in that way, that we were given the blessing of a tangible vision of God. But the more that we turn towards God in the daily bread, the more that we see God's provision in the daily bread, the more that we're aware that God's presence is made known in provision, in the making sure we don't go without, in the blessings that we receive on a regular basis. And some days it may not feel like we're especially blessed. We may feel stressed. We may feel like everything's going wrong, or we may feel like it's the end of the world. But God is there in the midst of that, sustaining us through it. And so we may never see a visual manifestation of God. We may not have God in a cloud of fire at night and a cloud of smoke during the day. But we do see God at work when we are provided for, when we have our daily bread, when we have communities of people who gather with us and do the work with us together. And so, how do you see God at work every day? Where do you see the provision of God? And do you see God's presence in the midst of that? Or are you waiting for a sign that comes in fire and smoke? One's more likely than the other.